The time loop trope is quite common in films, yet audiences never tire of it. A closer look at the reasons suggests that each film manages to put a fresh spin on it. Some incorporate horror, others mind-bending plots, and still others add science fiction elements. This year's latest film, Palm Springs, introduces a new and even fresher concept, a multi-person loop. It is November 9th, and the male protagonist, Niles, is leisurely sunbathing by the pool. When asked how he was feeling today, he replied, "Aren't yesterday, today, and tomorrow all the same?" The underlying meaning of these words was known only to him. That evening, a wedding was being held for a newlywed couple. The female protagonist, Sarah, is the bride's sister and one of the bridesmaids, but she is clearly in a foul mood, drowning her sorrows in alcohol. It was at this inopportune moment that the MC called her to the stage to give a speech. Just as she was flustered and at a loss, Niles grabbed the microphone and came to her rescue. His speech was heartfelt and eloquently phrased, moving everyone present. Moreover, his eyes were fixed on Sarah throughout his speech, which made her feel somewhat charmed. After getting to know each other more deeply, they both felt a strong connection and were ready to explore it further. However, just as Niles was disrobing, he was suddenly struck by an arrow. It turned out a strange old man was pursuing him with a bow and arrow. He fled wounded, and the old man's pursuit was unsuccessful. Cursing that this was not over, the old man then entered a nearby cave. After a flash of light, he vanished into thin air. Niles seemed to be aware of the cave's mysterious function, so he too entered it and disappeared. Sarah watched, utterly confused, and entered the cave to investigate, only to be sucked in by a bright light herself. The next morning, Niles was once again leisurely sunbathing by the pool. When asked how he was feeling, he still replied, "Aren't yesterday, today, and tomorrow all the same?" Everything was exactly as it had been the day before, the only difference was Sarah. She excitedly rushed over to demand an explanation for what on earth was happening. It turned out that after being sucked into the cave last night, she had woken up in her own bed, and the date was still November 9th, everything she had experienced the previous day was repeating itself. Niles began to explain unhurriedly. Simply put, the cave was the root of all evil. Anyone who entered it would become trapped in a time loop, forever confined to this single day with no escape. Niles had entered it once before and had been trapped ever since, and yesterday, Sarah had followed him in and was now also caught in the loop. Every time they fell asleep and woke up, they would return to this day, their memories intact, but everything else would reset. This cycle would never end. But Sarah had no desire to be trapped here. Hearing that the cave was key to the problem, she asked Niles to take her there, hoping that re-entering it might somehow restore normalcy. However, Niles had already tried this and knew that just like sleeping, it would only end his current day, and tomorrow would still be the same loop. Sure enough, when she opened her eyes again, it was still the same day. She tried to drive far away to escape, but unfortunately, after waking up, it was still the same day. Believing the key to the problem was sleep, she attempted to stay awake, but eventually, unable to resist, she merely closed her eyes for a moment, only to wake up to the same day once more. Finally, she even attempted suicide, yet upon opening her eyes after death, it was still the same day. Resigned, she finally approached Niles to ask if there was another way. Niles stated that he had tried every method without success, which is why he had become hedonistic, living only for pleasure. Mid-conversation, Sarah suddenly remembered the strange old man. What deep-seated grudge did he hold, and why was he so relentlessly pursuing Niles? In fact, initially, Niles was merely trapped alone in this particular day. Later, out of sheer boredom, he began to get acquainted with everyone he met on this day. On one occasion, he met the old man. They had so much fun together that their minds became clouded. The old man exclaimed, "This day is truly wonderful, I wish it could last forever." In a daze, Niles led him to a cave, claiming it could make him stay in this day. At the time, both were highly intoxicated, and the old man, confused, crawled in, only to become forever trapped in this day. He believed Niles had tricked him, and thus began to pursue him in various ways every day. Sarah listened and remarked, "How terrible, but she also believed Niles would surely find ways to entertain himself. For instance, by using the time loop to flirt with women. Niles said, "That's right, I've certainly been with many women. For example, the barmaid and the older woman at the bar." He had even tried to pursue the bride. However, winning over the bride on her wedding day proved to be an almost impossible feat, akin to reaching for the sky. Halfway through, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, "And Niles, has he ever been with me?" Niles thought for a moment and then said. Subsequently, Sarah attempted to escape the day several more times, but each attempt failed. She finally accepted her fate and decided to let loose with Niles. They danced with guns, taunted the short-tempered old man at the bar, flew a plane skyward only to crash it, and even placed a bomb in the wedding cake before blasting it into the air. As days passed in this manner, affection grew between them. On this particular day, they finally consummated their relationship. When they opened their eyes again, they were still in their own beds. Both were immersed in the joy of the previous night, their lips curving into smiles. But Sarah's smile quickly faded, for behind her stood the groom, bare-chested.
You should probably go.
The director had deliberately withheld a small detail. He intentionally didn't tell us what Sarah saw every morning. In fact, on this particular day, Sarah had just finished an affair with the groom, who was also her brother-in-law. Even though her sister was to be the bride tonight, she was still having an affair with her brother-in-law this very morning. Sarah herself felt guilty about this, which was why she had drowned her sorrows in alcohol earlier. Her desperate desire to escape this day in the past was also due to seeing her semi-nude brother-in-law at the start of each loop, which pricked her conscience. Later, when Niles and Sarah were out, the strange old man reappeared, disguised as a police officer, pursuing them. It seemed he was quite adept at playing games. Since none of the three could die, Sarah decided to play along with the old man. She eventually managed to run over the old man, but a real police officer, responding to a call, arrived just then. He used a taser, painfully electrocuting Niles and the others, and captured them. This incident infuriated Niles, because although the three of them could not die, the pain they experienced was real, and Sarah was actively causing that suffering. Sarah, also angered, retorted that if she had known Niles was so useless, she wouldn't have slept with him yesterday. Niles scoffed, saying, "Don't be ridiculous, we've already slept together thousands of times." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief, and Niles had no choice but to admit he had lied earlier. He had indeed been with Sarah countless times. At that time, Sarah hadn't yet entered the cave and was reset every day. All he had to do was deliver that heartfelt speech at the wedding, and she would be moved to give herself to him, countless times over. Sarah was heartbroken. She no longer wished to remain in this day and vowed to find a way to leave. From then on, Sarah suddenly vanished without a trace. Even as the day reset repeatedly, she never reappeared, and Niles searched everywhere for her each day, but to no avail. He had been angry, helpless, and completely disillusioned with life. Eventually, he even wished to die and actively sought out the strange old man. In fact, the old man hadn't pursued him for a while, and this time, he didn't attack Niles but instead had a heart-to-heart conversation with him. It turned out the old man's life had once been beautiful. He had a lovely garden and, late in life, 2 well-behaved children. His daughter was playing on a rocking horse, while his son was watering dog poop. This was indeed strange, yet also endearing. The reason he had been so angry and pursued Niles in the past was because Niles had trapped him in this day, preventing him from seeing his son grow up or his daughter get married. However, he later changed his perspective. After Sarah severely injured him by hitting him, he was admitted to the hospital's ICU, slowly facing death. That sense of despair made him realize for the first time that being able to live with his family was happiness enough, even if these days were to repeat endlessly. Even if his young son kept watering dog poop. Therefore, he never pursued Niles again after that. Finally, the old man brought up Sarah again, saying it was a good thing Niles could loop with Sarah, at least they could keep each other company. Unaware that Sarah had vanished, Niles was overcome with sorrow and silently bade farewell to the old man before returning home. Incidentally, Niles has a peculiar way of going home, since it's rush hour, driving home would mean getting stuck in traffic until very late. So he simply lets the old man shoot him, directly reincarnating to start a new day, which is quick and easy. But where exactly has Sarah been all these days? In fact, after her argument with Niles, she no longer wanted to wallow in self-pity. She broke off completely with her brother-in-law, then went to a cafe to take online courses and began to teach herself quantum mechanics. Initially, she did get sleepy as soon as class started, inadvertently triggering a new day. However, the next day, as soon as she opened her eyes, she rushed back to study. This was probably why Niles couldn't find her. He hadn't expected Sarah to start self-studying online courses after leaving him heartbroken. As the loop continued day after day, Sarah gradually became enlightened, accumulating a wealth of unusual knowledge. Even the professor felt she no longer needed his instruction. On this day, she finally understood the principle of the time loop and found Niles. Niles was both surprised and delighted, eager to reconcile with Sarah. But Sarah wasn't interested in romance. She only wanted to discuss science, explaining the principle of the time loop to him. Simply put, they are now like two individuals trapped inside a box, and this box automatically resets itself in 3.2 seconds at midnight. If they can blow themselves and the cave up together within these 3.2 seconds, they can escape this looping box. However, she wasn't sure whether escaping would send them to the past, the future, or simply kill them, but it was worth a try. Although the theory sounded far-fetched, as the saying goes, when in doubt, quantum mechanics. And since Sarah was a self-taught master of quantum mechanics, she was unlikely to be wrong. Not to mention, she had previously experimented with a goat, and the goat truly vanished. However, after hearing this, Niles didn't want to leave. He initially hesitated but finally spoke his mind. He confessed that he had fallen in love with Sarah and wanted to stay with her in this day forever. Sarah was touched, but she insisted on returning and turned to leave. Over the next day, Sarah's attitude towards everything became earnest. She made a heartfelt confession to her sister at the wedding and subtly hinted to her brother-in-law not to cheat and to cherish their relationship. After everything concluded, she went alone to the cave, preparing to detonate the bomb within the 3.2 seconds of reset to escape. Meanwhile, Niles was drowning his sorrows at the bar. He looked around, and all he saw was Sarah's reflection in his eyes. It was then that he realized he was willing to give up everything for Sarah, so he rushed to the cave that very night. He admitted that his reluctance to leave before was because he feared the bomb failing and killing him. But now he understood that being with Sarah, even if it meant dying together, was acceptable. Sarah was moved once again. This time, she and Niles embraced in the cave, pressing the detonator simultaneously with the reset. After the new day began, the two were still lounging by the pool, sunbathing, when unexpectedly, a family by the pool angrily yelled at them, telling them to leave. It turned out that the pool wasn't Niles's at all, but belonged to this family. This family had gone on a trip together on November 9th, which was why Niles had been able to occupy the pool. Now that time had advanced normally to November 10th, they had returned from their trip. Thinking of this, Niles and Sarah burst into laughter. In the future, they would enter normal time and space, and every event they encountered from then on would be fresh and new. Of course, Sarah didn't forget the old man. She sent him a text message, telling him how to leave the loop. As for whether the old man wanted to return to reality, well, that was his own business.